Listen to these staggering statistics. Skin cancer is the most common cancer worldwide. 1 in 5 will develop skin cancer by age 70. More than 2 people die of skin cancer in the US every single hour. Having 5 or more sunburns doubles your risk of melanoma, but when detected early, the 5-year survival rate of melanoma is 99%. In the US, more than 9,500 people are diagnosed with skin cancer every day. More people are diagnosed with skin cancer each year in the US, more than all the cancers combined. I'm not telling you those numbers to scare you. I'm just trying to bring more awareness to the dangers of skin cancer. Skin cancer is scary. I had skin cancer. It was a melanoma. I beat it. Here's my story. I grew up living in the sun. I was born in New Jersey. We had a pool when I lived there. We moved to Philadelphia when I was a teenager. We had a pool when I lived there too. My mom was a big sun worshiper, dark skin, and my dad was also a sun worshiper, but very fair skin with freckles. In the summertime, we lived outside, either swimming in the pool or just hanging out trying to get the best tan that we could. I have fair skin, not as fair as my dad's was, and definitely not dark like my mom, but somewhere in between. So I would usually burn, and then by the end of summer, I had a pretty good tan going. So I said it started with a sunburn and then it turned to a tan. But I burned a lot, I peeled, I blistered, but by the end of the summer, I was really tan, just the way I wanted. When I was in my late teens, my dad started seeing a dermatologist, and he would come home and he'd have these little spots on his face, and it was because the derm would freeze off these little spots. They're called actinic keratoses, and I learned a lot about them later in life. He started always wearing a hat outside. He would lather on the sunscreen, but still, I stayed in the sun, baked in the sun. My dad spotted a mole on my back, and he said, "You should go get that checked out by my dermatologist." I went, the mole was totally fine, but it was in that office that I really learned about the risks of skin cancer. So every year I would go and I would get my moles checked because I have some on my body, and I would always get the thumbs up, but I kept going for my yearly checks. I got married in my late 20s, moved to Seattle, where there's not a lot of sun, but actually a really high skin cancer rate. Anyway, I moved there, I did all the normal things. You find a doctor, you find a dentist, you find a gynecologist, and I found a dermatologist. She was great. She was a little bit older, but I really liked her, and she did my mole checks. I told her about my dad's history with his little actinic keratoses on his face, and I would always get the clear from her. She said, "You look great, everything looks great," but she always sent me home with this little piece of paper. It looked like a bookmark, and it had 5 different pictures of skin cancers. But she also sent me home with homework, and that homework was monthly do a full body check of any freckles or moles that might have turned up, or to look for any changes. And she said, if you see any of your moles that look like any of these pictures, come back and see me. I was a good student. I did my homework. I would check for those moles. And one day I think we were in Hood River Gorge. My brother's a big windsurfer, and he came out of the water and he pulled his wetsuit down, and on his shoulder, I saw what looked like one of those pictures that she sent me home with, but it was bigger. And I said, "Rob, you need to go get that checked out. That does not look good." So he went to that dermatologist, my cute lady. He had never seen her before, and it turned out it was a melanoma. And so he had to go into surgery and got a big chunk of his shoulder removed. Fortunately, it had not spread. He was totally fine. Borders were safe. They got everything out. But it just made me more aware. I had my dad with his little precancers. I now had a brother who had melanoma, and I kept doing my body checks. My derm had retired, and I had switched to another derm, and I had spotted a little, it was like the size of, it was teeny tiny, like smaller than my pinky nail. And it was on the back of my arm, and I was like, that looks like one of those pictures. And so I made an appointment right away to go see my derm. Went to my new derm, and he looked at it and he said, this is fine, don't worry about it. But I just kind of had a weird feeling. Keep listening. Because I had that weird feeling, I actually went to see another dermatologist just to get a second opinion. So I went to this new dermatologist, and she said, it's fine, don't worry about that mole. And I said, I just don't have a great feeling about it. Can you just scrape it and test it? So she scraped it and tested it. And a week later, I was just walking down the street in Seattle, and she called me and she said, are you sitting down? Which are not the words you want to hear from a doctor. And I just said yes, even though I was not sitting, I was just walking. And, but I'm not a liar. I wanted her to tell me the news right away. And she said, you were right. This is melanoma. We need to get this off of you right away. A melanoma? Are you kidding me? 2 different doctors told me it was just fine. When I questioned her about it, she said, well, we're usually not concerned if it is smaller than the head of a pencil eraser, which it probably was a little bit smaller than that. And she said, I probably could have lived with that melanoma for a long time without it spreading, but it could have started spreading right away, so I needed to get it removed. I went in less than a week later, got it removed, easy peasy, borders were fine, everything was good, it had not spread. But the huge takeaway here is listen to your gut. Okay, there's so much more. So this happened less than a year before I was moving to Park City, Utah. I live in Park City now, where it is sunny almost 365 days a year if it's not snowing. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm moving to high altitude where the sun is always shining. Is this a great idea? So right away, I found another derm here. And at this point, since I had had a melanoma, I was considered high risk. So I started to see a dermatologist that was highly recommended at the University of Utah. I went to see him. He was great, but I knew he saw that look of concern on my face. And he took my hands and he said, Regan, stop planning your funeral. You're gonna be fine. And I said, but I've had a melanoma and I had it pretty young. Doesn't that mean I'll develop more melanomas in my lifetime? And he said, not necessarily. What we're gonna do is have you come to see me every 3 months, and we're gonna do what's called mole mapping. So during that initial appointment, he scheduled a photographer to come in to do the mole mapping, and you stand completely naked and get in all kinds of funky positions. I mean, you have to spread your butt cheeks. They take pictures in between all your toes, a whole bunch throughout your hairlines. And it's really, really thorough. It takes a long time for them to get all these pictures. But because I already had a melanoma, this was fully covered through insurance, and it would give us all a baseline. So 3 months later, I came back. He pulled up my pictures on his computer, looked at everything really thoroughly, and said, you're doing a great job. Keep doing whatever you're doing. You know, by then I was crazy about sunscreen and not exposing my skin to the sun at all. So I kept doing what I was doing. I wore hats, I wore sunscreen, and I would go to see him every 3 months. So after a year of seeing him every 3 months, he said, you're doing great. Let's switch it to every 6 months. And I was like, ooh, only twice a year? And he's like, yep, just keep doing what you're doing. So twice a year I would go see him, and then he said, you're doing great, keep doing what you're doing, and you can come see me once a year. And that's where I'm at. Once a year, I go get my moles checked. When I would go for my mole checks, occasionally he would zap little things on my face just like my dad would have, and he would say, these are not dangerous, but they are precancerous, so we do need to remove them. That derm retired as well, and now I see a new derm, and I went for my yearly checkup, I don't know, just a few months ago, and 2 little spots on my cheeks, which just keep reoccurring, she zapped off and she said, you know, you should really consider doing what's called blue light therapy. So I am scheduled to do blue light therapy next week. I will bring you a whole video about my blue therapy light day and the days after, but what I can tell you for now, I'll give you a lot more information later, but basically they put a solution on your face and it sits for about an hour, and then this blue light activates it, and what it does is any precancers that you have brewing below the surface, it will pull those up. So I will bring you that whole new skincare journey that's coming up next week. But I'm so glad you joined me today and you listened to my story. You need to be your own best advocate. You need to speak up when you're at your doctor's office. If you just think something is off, trust your gut. If you think something's off, it probably is. I thank you so much for listening to my story today. If you love content that is all about health and fitness in your 50s, then please subscribe to this channel and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. My name's Regan, and this is Boom 50 Fitness, your new BFF. P.S. Don't forget to go see your dermatologist. And if you don't have one, go get one today.